Hi. Do you ever find yourself questioning your gender or sexuality? Do you even know the difference between the two? Don't worry if not, it's okay, I'm here to teach you. But it kind of can be interpreted as other things, or strictly to follow the social gender norms, which is like girls liking pink and playing with Barbie dolls and kitchen sets, and boys liking blue and playing with Hot Wheels and Legos. That kind of thing. Um, but in both cases for gender and sexuality, they're two different things. And it's also in both cases that you can't choose what they are to you or what you are to them. It kind of just comes to you, and whatever in the moment feels right to you. So in my speech, I'll be talking about why it's important for people to know the knowledge behind gender and sexuality, and why everyone should know the difference between the two. So, first we have to start off with sex assigned at birth. When you're first born into the world, the doctors have pulled you out and they have to look at your genitalia. That determines if you're going to be a baby girl or a baby boy. And that's basically what's going to be stuck with you for the rest of your life, unless you change that. Then there's gender identity, which ties in with your sex assigned at birth, but it also can't. See, gender identity is a gender that a person identifies with, rather it matches the sex assigned at birth, or rather it doesn't. It doesn't really matter, as gender is a social construct, basically. But then there's also gender expression, which basically means it's kind of you express yourself as the gender you were born with or as a different gender. You could be a biological boy wearing a girl's dress and having long hair and being able to get their nails done. Or you could be a biological girl at birth and wear shorts, boys' shorts, gym shorts, or get your hair cut and be able to construct all of that into a look where you look like a boy. Um, but then it also doesn't mean that you should use that to an advantage in a bad way. But then next is sexuality, which is usually interpreted as your sexual orientation, which is a person that you would be attracted in, or a gender, rather it's the same gender as you or a different gender of your own that you would find some sort of emotional, physical, or psychological attraction to. Um, so it's kind of under a spectrum of things, so it's kind of hard to explain, but uh in general, sexuality and gender is nothing that's too fixed or is really fixed. It really just goes with the flow of your life and how you handle things. Um, but over time, it's okay to question your gender, your sexuality, and all of that jazz. Because in reality, it all falls under a spectrum, and gender is a social construct, but it doesn't mean that it's something that you will fake or you will have to choose. It will basically choose you in a way. But I have sources that can help. According to NSVRC, which is the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, they say, in their own definition of terms, sex is a biological term referring to the genitalia and slash or reproductive anatomy of a person that they have at birth. A person has at birth, sorry. And then sexual orientation refers to a person's emotional, physical, spiritual, and sexual attraction to individuals of the same gender, another gender, or both slash all genders, and how people organize their lives around these desires. Um, They also made it very clear that gender is in fact social construct, and they're defined by expectations of ways that people, or specifically men and women, should talk, act slash dress, or any of that sort, really. But gender identity describes how and to what degree a person identifies with and the continuum of their masculinity and femininity, or any identities outside of that binary spectrum. But with gender and sexuality being the very uprising and popularity studied, it's kind of really easy to get kind of a lot of sources to back up these claims. So even according to CNN, sexuality is often interchangeably with sexual orientation, but it covers much more than that. So basically, in a nutshell, sex is more biological and gender is more on the social term. But they also go on to explain non binary, which could also tie into intersexuality, which is basically someone that's born with either both female and male parts, or both hormones, or either one or the other. Basically, it just doesn't match up to one biological gender at birth. But this also led Fraser Health to state that HealthLink BC has some good resources on sexual orientation, plus a lot of definitions and links to support their claims. Um, Sexuality itself has a lot of aspects to just being a human, really. And there's a lot of other websites, and I'm pretty sure hundreds of countless, that would be able to explain and back up their details with the whole spectrum of gender and sexuality. But there's also some statistics behind it. So, like, mainly adults living in the US, specifically 3.5%, identify as LGBTQ. Um, and also found on news.gallup, GALLUP.com. They had done basically a research, or a search in general, and collected data on surveys or any kind of questions that they may have questioned somebody. And the latest update on their LGBT identification finds 5.6% of US adults identifying as LGBTQ. Um, so the current estimate is up from 1.5%, which was the previous update based on 2017 data. Currently, 86.7% of Americans say they are heterosexual or straight, and 7.6% do not answer the question about their sexual orientation. Um, so basically, Gallup's 2012 to 2017 data has rough to little 5% of no option or no opinion responses, which would really say a lot. But which also has into play because there's still gender differences in that statistic as well. It's stating that women are more likely than men to identify as LGBTQ, which is a statistic of 6.4% versus 4.9%. And it also states that women are more likely to identify as bisexual than men as well, which is a 4.3% to a 1.8%. But with all that in mind, it's easier to just wrap up and say that you shouldn't be afraid to basically explore yourself and explore who you are, explore your gender and sexuality, or rather, it makes you uncomfortable. It's okay to go against the gender norms, society's gender norms, but also don't feel pressured to put a label on yourself. Not everything in life has to be labeled. But just make sure you're comfortable and content where you're searching. But yeah, thank you so much. Bye bye.